So we're now on the top of Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, on the second line. V'kalas beno yeshla hefsek. Is this really so that kalas beno, meaning his son's wife, doesn't go up and down? What about his grandson's wife? But Tanya, don't we have a brisa that says kaloso erva? The Torah prohibits kaloso. A man is not allowed to have a relationship with his son's wife. Kalas beno shnia. So what's kalas beno? That's his son's wife. And that's already a shnia. So that's not his kala, not his daughter-in-law. It's his son's daughter-in-law. V'cheinata omer, the beno, meaning kalas beno, ube ben beno, and kalas ben beno, at sof kol hadoros. So you can't tell me that what Rav said, that yeshla hefsek, is referring to kalasa, because you see clearly in this brisa that it goes through the generations, his grandson's wife, etc. The Gemara answers, Ela Ema, when Rav said yeshla hefsek, he was referring to kalas bito, which means the wife of his granddaughter through his daughter. The wife of his grandson through his daughter. And the Iser of kalas bito is only archakal arayas, to arayas doraisa, kishekorvosam shava, on that same level. So we're saying that the Iser of kalas bito is not a harchakal arayas doraisa, which only applies when it's an equal level of kurva, but rather a different chashik. And therefore, they won't prohibit and establish an Iser Shnios in a kurva that's on a lower level. And the Gemara is going to prove this. The Omer of Chizda, Ha Milsa Migava Rabba Shmiele. This is what I heard from a great man. Umana, who is that great man? Rabbi Ami. And he said, Lo Asru Kala Ella Mipnei Kala. The Gzera not to marry a Kala is a Gzera for another Kala. And Rav Chizda now has to explain what Rabbi Ami has in mind. And first he starts with the following small introduction. The Omruli Kaldoi, those who see in the stars, Malfana Havyas, you'll become a Chacham. I mean, I thought in my mind, if the intention of these star seers are Gavarabba Avina, then I would become a great rabbi. Then Asbara, I will be able to explain Midaiti based on my own knowledge, my own understanding. However, if what they had in mind is Makri Dardiki Avina, that I will become a Malame Tinokas to teach children, then I will not be able to explain it on my own knowledge. Ashayla mirabanan di asu beiknis. Rather, I will ask the Chachamim who enter into the synagogue, to the Beis HaKnesset. The Hashta, Sparta midati. But now I think I can explain this very cryptic statement of Rabbi Ami based on my own understanding. And what is that? O asru kalas bito, ela mishum kalas bino. So if his daughter has a daughter-in-law, that gzera is because we're afraid somebody might mix that up with kalas bino, his daughter-in-law through his son. So we see that there's no ikar, there's no isa mikar adin. Kalas bino is meikar adin, because in the case of bino, you could have a case of a kala doraisa. Would have been his own kala, so therefore his son's kala is osur midrabanan because of the tzad of dorais of kalasa. So therefore, Kalas Bino is Asura. But in the case of Bito, there's no tzad at all of a Kala Minatora. I mean, you're talking about Bito. So if you can talk about Kalas Bito, where's the tzad Minatora? Therefore, Kalas Bito is only Asura because V'chashash Shem Yachlifu, that the people out there might make a switch and they will equate it with Kalas Bino. And it'll be Mater Kalas Bino, which again is a D'Rabbanan. It's only Shnius Larayas. But they prohibited Kalas Bito because of Kalas Bino. They're so similar. Only Abayla Rova, Asbir Loch. I think I can explain an example of, in reality, in other words, in our community, of a chash where there might be a chilufin, a very serious chilufin, a very common or very plausible chilufin, a mistake. Kigon kalosa debei bar tsisai, and she, kaloso, of this particular family, had also a kalasa ben and also a kalasa bas. It was very interesting. It was very easy, shall we say, to make that chiluf. Rav Papa Amar, Kigon kalosa debei Rav Papa bar Abba, and again he had a kalasa ben and a kalas bas. Vashem Kamon kalosa debei Mari bar Isik. Again, he had both a kalas ben and kalas bas. Now we're going to talk about what's called Eshes Doda, the wife of his uncle. Now, on a Doraisa level, we're talking about his uncle, who is the brother of his father, and they both share the same father. This is formulated in Vayikra Yudches, Ervas achi avicha lo sigale, el ishto lo sikrav dodascha hi. So this is your aunt by marriage, who married your father's brother, and it means that your father and his brother share the same father. However, if it's the wife of a different uncle, it's the brother of your father because they share the same mother, they're only maternal brothers, then according to Torah law, it's mutter to marry the wife of your father's maternal brother. However, Gazru Chachamim, in certain cases of Dodaso, Chazal instituted an Isur D'Rabbanan of Shnios Li'eches Achi of. And the Gemara is going to have a number of questions about exactly in which scenarios they prohibited this D'Rabbanan and which they did not. Iboilahu. Eshes Achi Ha'em Min Ha'em Mahu. What about your aunt who's married to your mother's brother, and this mother's brother, this uncle, shares the same mother as your mother? So you're talking about an uncle through your mother, and he is a maternal brother to your mother. And the Gemara vacillates. Eshes achi ha'av min ha'em. It could be possible that we only prohibit the wife of your father's brother min ha'em, but not your mother's brother min ha'em. Uve eshes achi ha'em min ha'av, or the case of the wife of your mother's brother through the father. In other words, this is your uncle through your mother, but your mother and this uncle are paternal brother and sister. Because in both these cases, at least as an av side, it's not pure mother. There's an av side. Either it's Eshes Achi Ha'av, right? So you talk about your father's brother, so there's a father element there, or the wife of Achi Ha'em Min Ha'av. However, Aval Hecha Deleket Sad Av, let's say Dodaso Me'imo, So we're talking about a brother who is who is a wife of your mother's brother when your mother and your brother are both share the same mother. So there's no tzad av at all. Lo gazu be'rabbanan. O dilmo, lo shna. We're not going to make this distinction. And even if it's your mother's brother, because your mother and her brother share the same mother, even so, his wife, your uncle's wife, will be prohibited midrabban. Amar of Safra. I don't get the suffix. He gufa gzera, but nan nikum v'nigza gzeru l'gzera. In the case of your mother's brother mina av, that itself is only a gzera. And now you're going to say your mother's brother through, let's say, mother, a maternal brother, that's already a gzera l'gzera, one gzera built on the shoulders of another gzera. Amar Rava rejects Rav Safra. Atu kulu. In all shnios, basically, lav gzera l'gzera ninu. For example, I'll prove to you that shnios operates with gzera l'gzera. Imo is an erev. Aim imo, his grandmother from his mother's side, is a shnia. V'gazru, now we have an iser al aim aviv. Correct? That's his grandmother through his father. And that's gzera mishum aim imo. V'taimamai, why did they make this gzera on aim aviv, even though there's no erev at all? And the answer is kulu debei ima rabasi karule. Whether it's his mother's mother or his father's mother, it's all called with one name. And that's called Beis Ima Rabba. No, it's a savta, a grandma. So if it's one shem lekulam, then those two gzeras are considered like one gzera. And Rava gives an example of this. Eshes Aviv Erva. His father's wife is an Erva Dorais. Eshes Avi Aviv, that's his father's wife, who's married to his grandfather from his father, that's a Shnia. And the Rabbanan extended this Gzera, Al Eshes Avi Ima, to the wife of his maternal grandfather. Mishum Eshes Avi Aviv. Gzera to his paternal grandfather. B'taimamai, debei Abba Rabba correlate, it's all one Shem Echad, base Sab. Another example, where they made a Gzera, even though it's a Gzera l'Gzera. Eshes Achi Ha'av, so we have his aunt, who's married to his brother's father, Mina Av, and his brother and his father share the same father. That's already Erva Dorais. Eshes Achiav Mina'im, if you're talking about the wife of his father's brother, who's a maternal brother, Shnia, that's already a D'Rabbanan. Now, V'gazral Eshes Achi Ha'em Mina'av, so we're talking about the wife of his mother's brother, if his mother and his brother share the same father, and that's Gzera Mishum Eshes Achi Ha'av, who's married to his uncle, and is Achi Aviv Mina'em, the time of my. Why did they make a Gzera on Eshes Dodo, which is his mother's brother from the father, who share the same father, Mishum Dekulu, to Beit Dodi Korele? There's one shame of base Dodo. Now, since the Gemara explains that there's no Gzera l'Gzera in these cases, then the Gemara goes back to its original suffix with regard to Eshes Dodo in the case of his mother's maternal brother. That's called Ach Imo Mina'em. Ma Toshma Dechi Asar of Yehuda Bar Shilo came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Omar, he declared, Amri B'Marov in Eretz Yisrael, with regard to the Isser Shnios, they have a klal, Kol Shebenekeva Erva B'Zachar Gazal Ishto Mishum Shnia. if there's a tzuras kurva of an akeva, the osa tzuras kurva im haisa nekeva, and that means she would be an erva, then if we plug in a zachar, a male, gazra al ishto mishum shniya. B'Rabbanan, they prohibited his wife with an isa shniya. The Gemara is going to explain how we prove from this klal of Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo the din of eshes achi ha'em min ha'em. V'yamar Rava, furthermore, Rava had a question on this klal, uklolahu, is this really an absolute ironclad rule that we only make a gzera of this sort? We always make a gzera of this sort in shniyos. V'harei, what are we going to do with chamotzo, who's an erva min Torah? His mother-in-law is an erva min Torah, and you have the same tzuras kurva in eshes chamiv, the wife of his father-in-law, who's like his mother-in-law by marriage. And yet muteres. We had a discussion about this on Omid Aleph, that she's muteres. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo's klal, we should make her asura mishum shniya, because chamiv and chamoso have the same darg of kurva. And just like chamoso is asura min Torah, they should make a gzera on eshes chamiv. It's also his mother-in-law, by virtue of the fact that she's married to his father-in-law. And now Rav is going to bring other examples where we don't aser, which we should prohibit in Shniyos, according to the klal of Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo, and that is bas chamoso. Now, bas chamoso is the sister of his wife, and that's an erva min Torah achos ishto. But eshes bas chamoso is muteres, right? That's eshes ach ishto, the wife of his brother-in-law, of his wife's brother, is muteres. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo's klal, if in the same tzuras kurva of ach ishto, isha choisa sura midinachos ishto, then the chacham should extend that gzera in ishto, shetei asura b'isur shniya. Another example, bas chamiv erev, right? The daughter of his father-in-law is an erva, that's achos ishto, and yet eshes ben chama muteres, the wife of the son of his father-in-law, is muteres. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo's klal, since ilu b'makom ben chava v'isa isha, and she would be in the same tzuras kurva that she has now, is chayis asur midoraisa midinachos ishto. Then the chacham should have made a gzera on ishto and to prohibit her mishum shniya. Another example is chargato. So we're talking about the daughter of his wife from a different marriage is an erva min Torah. It says ervas icho bita lo segala es bas benov es bas bita lo sikach legalos erva. So it's not only bas icho, it's also nechdasa, his wife's granddaughter. And yet eshes chargo, the wife of his wife's son from a different marriage, muteres. And another example is bas choragto, which is the daughter of his wife's daughter. That's an erva doraisa, as we saw in the pasuk earlier. And yet, eshes ben churgo, who is married to the son of his wife's son, meaning his wife's grandson's wife, is muteres. And again, according to your klal, she should be included under shnios la'arayos. So we should come to the conclusion now that based on all the women that we mentioned in all the scenarios above, that the klal of Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo only applies, or the Rabbi Yeshua bar Shilo, that they made a gzera on eshes zachar if she would have been in a keva, she would be us erva, is then that's going to be lasuye mai, lav lasuye eshes achi ha'em. We're talking about the wife of his uncle, who is his mother's brother mina'em, his mother's paternal brother. The kol shebin nikeva erva is bezacher gazal ishto mishum shniya. That if it would have been Baila who hoisa nikeva makum shebaila hoisa nikeva, it's a strange language. Hoisa nesteres mishum erva doraisa shay Torah omra the osra ervas achos imcha. And the Gemara darshans later on that Nesra achos imo bein em shiachos mina'af bein mina'em is therefore gozral ishto mishum shniya. Gemara asks Maishno Hani, why is it that in all the cases of Rava they were matir eshes zachar, even though we should include him in the gzera according to this klal Maishno Hacha. But here in Eshes Dodo, which means Achi Imo Mina'em, that she's Asura. And Mar explains, Bechad Kedushin Makaravla, Adiika Avalhani, Adiika Trey Kedushin Lo Makarav. In the case of Eshes Dodo, that's the wife of his uncle, who is his mother's brother, because they share the same mother, there's only one Kedushin that she got married to his dode, and therefore she becomes a krova. But honey, in all the cases of Rava, we can go through them one by one, you need trey kedushin. You need two ma'aseh kedushin. Otherwise, there's no kiruv, there's no kurvim. And therefore, they only made this gzeira in the case of the wife of his uncle, who is his mother's brother, Mina'em, because that's considered a closer kurva, because it's created, generated by one ma'aseh kedushin. But not an Eshes Chamuv, which requires two Ma'aseh Kedushin. His Kedushin with his wife, and then the Kedushin of his father-in-law with his wife, or Eshes Ben Chamav O Chamosa. The Kurva is only created through Shnei Kedushin. His Kedushin with his wife, and the Kedushin of the son of his father-in-law with his wife. Sholach le Rav Mesharshia, let's just see where we're up to. We're counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines up from the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. The Rav Papa. Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu. Eshes Achi Avi Ha'av. So we're learning now about a question of Shniyos Larayos in the case of a woman who's married to not your father's brother, but rather your father's father's brother. I guess you'd call it a great uncle. So that's your father's uncle. Achi Avi Aviv. That's case number 1. Case number 2 is Achos Avi Ha'av. So we're talking about a great aunt who is the sister of your father's father. Mahu. Is that included in the Gzera D'Rabbanan of Shniyos Larayos? Now the Gemara analyzes the Stadei HaSafek. Milamata Ervo Lamala Nami Gosumbe. Shall we say that since if we would have gone generations below, it would be included in the Gzera? And therefore, we should include this as well in the Gzera. Odilma ha is polig darta. Okay, so let's just see if we can understand that Tzad to say that Lamala Nami Gozube, the first Tzad in the Gemara. Says lamata means someone who's married to his uncle is called achi aviv, his father's brother. So the wife of his father's brother is for sure included in the Isser of Isserei Bia, we'll call it. Now that's one generation lower than someone who is Achi Avi Aviv, who is his great uncle. And Achos Aviv, that was the second question that we had, would be one generation lower down the line than Achos grandfather, from his aunt, his great aunt. And therefore, since Lamata is an Erva Min Torah, so to give one example that we mentioned earlier, it would be someone who's married to his father's brother, that's an Erva Min Torah, is therefore Lamala Gazrube, Nami Gazrube, which would go one generation over, up the line, and instead of the wife of your father's brother, the wife of your father's uncle, meaning your grandfather's wife. Oh, Dilma has polydorso. Should we say, no, that's already too far removed. That's a whole nother generation. Toshma will quote a brisa, Mahin Shnios. So the brisa now gives a list of Shnios. Veloka chashiv lehu. And your great aunt is not included in the list. And therefore, we're going to prove from the absence of these cases of your great aunt that that's not included in the Isur Shnios. And the Gemara rejects this. Tana v'shir. I'm going to prove to you that the brisa is not an exhaustive list. My shir, how do I prove that there's something that was omitted in the list? Dehai, we have the cases of a great aunt is also shir. In other words, when the Tana of a brisa, or for that matter of a Mishnah as well, will be Meshayer, and we can always assume that there are other cases that he's Meshayer. If I can prove to you that there was one case that was omitted from the list, then I have a right to expand that to other cases. And the answer is that Shir Shnios de Bei Rabbi Chia. Later on, we're going to have a whole list of Shnios de Bei Rabbi Chia. And even though these are Asuros, nevertheless, they were omitted from this brisa. So we already have a breakthrough of Shir. Amemar Achshir bi Eches Achi Avi Aviv Ubachos Avi Aviv. Memar came to the final conclusion, we had a suffix about it, that a great aunt is not included in the Gzera of Shnios. And the Gemara now raises the following objection to Memar. Omer le Rav Hillel le Rav Ashi. L'didi chazili, I saw the halachos of Shnios of Mar B'rei D'Ravana. Mar had a certain list of Shnios, Uksivan Shistere. There was a list of 16 different categories of Shnios L'Isura. And now Rav Hillel tries to analyze how we get to the number 16. My love, shouldn't we say the following? Tamni Dimas Nisa. We have 8 that are listed in the brisa that we had before. The Od Shis Debei Rabbi Chia. And later on, we'll see in the Gemara another 8 that are included in the brisa Rabbi Chia. I'm sorry, another 6. Did I say 8? I meant to say 6. Scratch it. So we have 6 plus 8 is 14. How do we get to the magic number 16? And now we're going to add the aunt of his father, whether it's his father's brother's wife or his father's sister's wife, Hashitzere. So we end up with 16 because we add 14 plus 2. So we're going to add now Doda Aviv and Achoskeno. Achoskeno means his great aunt, who is the sister of his grandfather. So how could a Meimar be machshir in the case of a great aunt when great aunt is included according to Rav Hill's understanding of the Bryce of the Bei Rabbi Chia? So now Rav Ashi asks Rav Hillel the following question: according to your understanding, that you're asking based on the minyan, the enumeration of 16 of Mar Berei D'Rabbanan, Shevserei Havim. The number should really be accurately calculated as 70, not 16. Ta'ika Eshes Achdi Ha'em. What about your father's sisters? Again, let me get that straight. Your father's brother. I'm sorry, let's get again. Eshes Achi Ha'em. Talking about your mother's brother, the wife of your mother's brother. So she's married to your uncle, who is your mother's brother. Min Ha'em, which means that your mother and her brother share the same mother. So they are maternal brother and sister, and the wife of that uncle, who is the maternal brother of your mother, is also Pashtina Lisura, is also prohibited. And that would jack up the number to 17. So Rav Hillel rejects this question, this objection of Rav Ashi, and he says, Holo Kasha. That didn't bother me. And here we'll turn to page Chaf Beis, the Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. Hanach Tarti de Damyan Lahadodi Kechada Choshev. We have two arayos that are very, very similar, and it's called one. And those are his great aunt, and it could be his great aunt because she's married to his father's father, or his great aunt because she's the sister of his grandfather. Those are considered one. Veha, but someone who is married to his uncle, who is his mother's maternal brother, is added to the minyan. And now we have the number 16, Shitzere. So Rav Hillel now ends up his question. So now we have a great aunt on both sides, through either his father's father or through his father's mother, and the great aunt is included in the number 16. And this is a rejection of Ameimar. So Rav Ashi says to Rav Hillel, even according to your logic, right? You were quoting Mar Barabana. If it would have said in the list of Mar Barbachana explicitly Letera, miavis samchas alay, would you rely on his calculation, his enumeration, and be matir on his basis? For sure not. Why? The Mar Berei D'Rabbanan michasim alay. Did he himself, Mar Berei D'Rabbanan, sign on to such a heter? So therefore, if you're not going to rely on this transmission of Mar Bered Ravina Lakula, is Hashtanami Dechsiva Lisura Lav Mar Bered Ravana Chasim Alai. We're not going to rely on it lahachmir to generate an Isser, just like we don't rely on it leheter.